2, yes.
Hi, welcome to part 2 of our video. I'm going to start talking to these mommies today about normal, healthy sexual development, specifically focusing on the age group of 0 to 5 years old. We're also going to look at what is could maybe be seen as abnormal behavior as well as inappropriate behavior. We're also going to talk about the normal behavior. But we're going to first start off with the questions that mommies might have. Then we're going to launch into what is normal and what is inappropriate, and then how to address that, as well as what the red flags are in terms of sexual development. So I'm talking now about what is normal for the first 2 years. I'm going to explore. Oftentimes, we get that a reaction would be, Sisa, gaga, don't. Okay. So if that's my strongest experience, what am I going to think about my penis? Sisa, gaga. There's a difference between Sisa, gaga, don't, or it's going to fall off. You've heard that before, no? Or your hands are going to grow hair. Where do we get these things from? Anyway, so there's a difference between Sisa, gaga, and, oh yes, you've got a penis. And you've got a finger. Feel your finger. Actual finger. And then you give him his finger, right? So you divert, but you also affirm. Boys, I needed to have said that with. Boys have penises. Yes, you have a penis. We pee with that. No, don't pee in my eye, you know? I think that's one of the first things that a baby mommy learns, eh? She learns to put the nappy on top of the penis before the And our girl moms, we don't really know that, but you go, just cover the penis. Yeah. And boys, when they grow up, having been fostered in that way, they're much more comfortable. Have you seen that? I don't know if your husbands are. Much more comfortable with their sexuality. Because they don't have hang-ups. Because they were never taught, dochtertjies doen dit, girls close their legs, girls must do this. Boys are never taught what they're allowed and not allowed to do. So sometimes they're a bit of hooligans, eh? But we should be careful of the messages that we give. So be wanting to explore. There's a study that says by 56 weeks, all boys have discovered that they have a penis. Are you agreeing with me if I tell you that it's not sexual at all? Things become sexual when I'm older for my brain to get it and when my hormones start to work. And if it's modeled to me that it is sexual, then it becomes sexual. But for a little kid, even 2, 3, 4 years old, it's not sexual. It's another part of my body. Have you also seen how the kids are very comfortable with their bodies when they're this little? Because they're exploring. So the nudity is high with this age group, which is normal. Obviously, I'm going to teach them norms by dressing them before I go to a shopping center. But if it's hot outside, it's my own house, or it's in the beach and it's safe, get off your clothes, go jump in the water. That fosters for them a comfortability with themselves and their bodies. Very natural. 2, 3 years old, they start to want to explore. We are naturally curious. If I were to give all of you a packet today, you wouldn't even wait for an hour to look what's in there. You would check it now before we even start. You would just quickly glance in it. So the kids are naturally curious. We were made curious about everything and anything, including our pachorster, which is the penis. So, my word for. So they're going to want to explore. So by boys, it's, what did I say, 56 weeks. By girls, no, it's the other way around, sorry. By boys, it's 48 weeks. And with girls, it's by 56 weeks. They do discover that they have a labia or I some call it vagina, but it's not really accurate though. But anyway, of poly. We also have a nickname word for it. So most little ones do touch there. And the thing is, what will your reaction be? That's going to weigh the strongest. Will it affirm their gender? Will it affirm their purpose? And the fact that they are healthy and growing? Or will it do the opposite? Will it foster shame? That's a conversation for another day, but we can think of pornography. And we can think of LGBTQ and everything that goes with that. And we can see how that indicates to us adults who grew up without positive, natural, normal, healthy sexual input. You know what I'm talking about. You've seen, I hope your husbands are not doing this. Have you seen the Toyota bakkies with the bluebell ballas hanging from, hello? Ne?
No, it's just...
And in our culture, we're just like, what? And it should have started with them when they were a little boy, getting positive messages. Normal, healthy messages about erections and penises, you know? And also, another thing that's physically normal is a third of baby boys can have an erection by the first 3 days that they are born for up to 30, 40, 50 seconds. They can have an erection. And usually the dads are very proud. But it's a biological thing.
Yeah.
We also, how baby girls are born with hormones being excreted, if that's the correct English word, ne? Because of the mommy's hormones, and it helped the birthing process. There's nothing sexual to it. It's part of the birthing process. So there's no shame when it comes to the normal of my body. There's naturally inquisitiveness. And there's also, I'm not stuck in that moment when I'm exploring my penis. I can move to other stuff to explore as well. If I was stuck, that could be seen as a red light. That could be seen. The other thing that is normal is having questions. Well, if they can talk, because this is a very young group, right? But when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, 2, 3, 4 years old, you start to notice mommies who are pregnant, and you start to ask, where do babies come from? It's normal. So you can launch into a long conversation, or you can just say and teach maybe about a sperm and an egg cell getting together in a woman's body. And that's not for children, it's for grown-ups, because it is for grown-ups, right? Where do babies come from is very normal to ask. Let me think what else is normal. Spontaneous. That's the other thing. A naked body spontaneous thing. Oh, mommy, what does your boob do? And I'm spontaneous in touching your boob. And just because they're exploring doesn't mean we should just not do anything about it. Eh? It teaches them boundaries. If we say, it is my boob, but it's private, it's only for me to touch. Unless they're older than 2, or younger than 2, or younger than 3, and you still breastfeed, then that's a different thing. Then you tell them where and when they can touch. Because maybe you'd be embarrassed if they touch right in front of the cashier at Checkers, So then you teach them. Everything about the sexual that the kids know, or we want them to know, is something that we should teach them. They just don't miraculously know this.
Sorry, I have a question on the touching.
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, I have a 2.5-year-old and I'm still breastfeeding. And anytime he's breastfeeding, he wants to touch the other one to play with. And I don't like it because it's also one of my sensitive parts. So immediately he starts and says, don't do it. So anytime he wants to feel relaxed, then he wants to start, I immediately push his hand and graduate. Am I doing it right by telling him not to touch my other breast that he's not feeding on? Because I tell him it is only for breastfeeding and not for touching. Okay. Am I doing something right? Or
you are. You're doing something right by telling him and by enforcing your boundary, because you're a human being, you're a sexual being as well. You have and you're allowed to, and you should have a boundary.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe what I can just suggest to add is you give him something instead of your boob to touch.
Okay.
Just substitute it with something soft and warm.
Okay.
Okay. That's what we do when we try to wean kids off dummies and stuff like that. We never just take away from a young kid. We substitute with something appropriate. You can think what that appropriate something is. Maybe a soft blankie, maybe a favorite toy. But then that blankie and toy only comes out when it's breastfeeding time.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions about that? Yes.
When is breastfeeding, and when is it starting to get something more? It's a question because I'm a nanny and an au pair, so I've seen a lot of children breastfeed through like 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
So when is it starting to get I'm not a mommy, sorry.
Won't you just, for the sake of the camera, just repeat the first part of your question? When is breastfeeding?
When is breastfeeding, and when is it starting to get something more?
All right. That's a very good question. So I'm going to again use the example of the two camps. We've got the rigid camp over here who would never breastfeed ever. And then we've got the camp over here who would breastfeed until 8 if the child would allow them, you know. So your values are your values. From an emotional and a psychological developmental aspect, I'm going to try and give you some ideas of the angle that I'm looking at. Is I want to see a 3-year-old using more things from the environment to soothe himself than a booby. You hear what I'm saying? I want to see him exploring what his other options are. Because what I've seen with older kids who breastfeed is when they fall and they bump their knee, they're on the booby. When daddy says no for something, they're on the booby. So it's becoming a pacifier for them. And that hinders their emotional development. Okay? So when it becomes a manipulation tool that I manipulate with from the mommy side. So if you don't put that back, I'm not going to give you booby. If you put that back, I'll give you booby.
Okay.
That's not okay.
One of the mothers asked me that I'm appearing. So she's 2 years old and I can see she's doing that.
See, then it's time.
Yes.
And also, we don't just take away. We wean then, slowly, but making sure the emotional needs in the environment are being tended to. There are very sensitive times, well, all over development if we look at child development, but when I'm weaning my 18-month-old or 24-month-old child from breastfeeding, it's a sensitive time.
Yeah.
It's a delicate time. That's the word I'm trying to say. So other stuff needs to be built in. Healthy stuff. Substitutes. Healthy substitutes should then be built in. And the mommy doing that needs oodles of support. Because for some moms, it's the most emotional thing ever to stop breastfeeding. Others are just so happy they can stop breastfeeding that it's also emotional, but in a different way. So if you do that and if you want to wean your child, it does take a village, ne? So you need your village in that moment. Because oftentimes I do see that the kids do well. If they mama, but mama's not there, so then they're forced to daddy, and then daddy should be there. Not for hours on end that it's traumatizing for this child to not have his mommy near. But there's sensitive times of the day when the mommy really cannot be breastfeeding anymore. Then daddy should be there and mommy should be away. Because you never know, they smell. And for 2 years, it's been their strongest experience. So it's very delicate. When it also becomes a tool to prolong having sex with your own husband, because no, 3-year-old is still breastfeeding, we can't have sex, then it's also not okay. And the moment it's not for the child's physical benefit anymore, then for whose benefit is that? Then I'm asking. For whose benefit? But it's a very delicate thing.
Yeah.
And each to their own, ne? Each to their own. It's a contentious thing as well. But it always, if I just look from a counseling perspective and an abnormal psychology perspective, is I want to know whose need is this? When my child is 4 and I'm still breastfeeding, whose need is this? Because psychopathology says that when we look at mommy-child relationships, there's pathology there from an adult side. If the adult parents in such a way to fulfill only the adult's needs, that's pathology. And that's not okay. That hinders normal, healthy development. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So that was the normal. I've got a book. I'm going to bring my books out. Ursula asked me to bring some books. So when I'm done, I've got it in my car. So that has to do with the normal. When we move over to the 2, 3, 4-year-old group, the normal still is to an extent to be spontaneous. To want to be naked at times, but they do start to react on when mommy says, please put your shirt on. They start to react. Please don't do that because we can't do that now. We're in Checkers. I'm laughing. Put your penis away. We're in Checkers now, So the 3, 4, 5-year-olds can start to understand that, and it's very normal for them to be curious about naked bodies. And it's very normal for them to again and still explore, and it's normal for them to have questions about sexuality. I mean, babies. Sexuality, yes, and where babies come from. Have you seen this age group, how curious they are about why boys stand and pee-pee and why girls sit on the toilet? Because remember now what's relevant for them? Potty training. So everything that goes around and circles around potty training is relevant for them. So almost anything goes in terms of normal at that stage, except when it's hurting someone, or when there's fear, or when the child himself gets hurt, then that's not okay regarding the normal of potty training. So usually what happens with any age group, if there's a question, there's a proper answer, the curiosity should be satisfied. If the curiosity persists, different ball game. All right. So let me talk to you about the red flags, which is the problems that we could see. Let's tackle somewhere from baby to 5 years old. All right. I'm teaching this part always in my workshops very mindfully. Because if we can tick 1 or 2 of the red flags, it doesn't mean that our child has been abused and we should lay awake now for 3 months. What we do when we look at the red flags, which I will send them to you on the WhatsApp groupie, is we look into the context of the bigger picture. So if I see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 red flags, I might be onto something. But if it's 1 or 2 red flags and there's no other worries that I have outside of my child's behavior, then it's a different story. So just be mindful of the red flags. You can't just take out 1 red flag because then it's out of context. That's what I'm trying to say. So with a red flag would be, we need to be very careful of this, but let's start with the physical. So I'm touching myself the whole time, even though mommy tells me, let's not do that. But I'm also touching others the whole time. It's like I can't get enough. Sexual organs now. That's a red flag. Another red flag would be infections, vaginal infections. Penis can also get infected. The red skin around the penis. In the absence of another explanation. Another explanation for infections can be antibiotics, butt soap, bathing salts, whatever you put in the bath, the kind of soap you use, the soap that you wash your clothes with, that could be different explanations for the infections, all right? For the rest of the red flags, the key word is sudden. So there are sudden fears of a person, a place. That's not explained by any other thing. Sudden, that's the word. So my child was okay to go to those friends' house, but all of a sudden, she clings to me, she does not want to go there. I'm not saying sexual abuse, but I could be saying trauma. I'm not saying that necessarily it's sexual. So that's the other thing is sudden fears. And that goes together with sudden nightmares or night terrors. But, again, if it's not otherwise explained. So for a 2-year-old, I think it's about 30 to 40% of kids who are 2 years of age do get night terrors. Doesn't mean that your child is possessed, number 1. And it also doesn't mean that your child is sexually abused. Okay. A third of all kids by that age go through night terrors. A night terror is when your child is not awake and it happens before 1 o'clock at night. Actually, before 12 o'clock at night. So the night terror happens in the REM cycle, which is the first part of the evening. And your child is literally terrorized. Don't waken them up. Don't wake them up when they're in terror. But that's a night terror. A nightmare happens later in the sleep cycle. Later at night. And they're sort of awake. They're sort of with it. But with a night terror, they're not. So have a look at night terrors and nightmares that you cannot explain otherwise. Then I'm wondering. Also, regression in terms of skills that I have mastered. So now I'm potty trained and I'm dry and I'm starting to have clipsies again. And I pee-pee in my bed or I wee in my pants again. And there's no other explanation. And it was sudden. And it goes with fears. There's night terrors. The other thing that also is a red light is separation anxiety. That's not developmentally appropriate. Separation anxiety, help me now here, and Ursula, you too. It should lessen by 2 years of age, isn't it? From 18 months to 24 months, the separation anxiety. So now I'm talking about a 4-year-old who's got severe all of a sudden, persistent separation anxiety. That's not in the norm. Okay. So separation anxiety goes with that.
Sorry, so when does it usually stop? Separation.
By 2 years, by 24 months. Normal developmental separation anxiety. But some kids don't even go through separation anxiety in terms of child development. It has to do with personality and. But for a certain age group, it is normal to be scared to be separated from mommy and to be anxious when I'm separated from mommy. There's a developmental, it has to do with cognitive development.
It's progression.
There we
So
go.
when there's a big progression in something, you get separation anxiety. And the 18, where you are now, 18 to 2 years, is that's the worst.
That's it. So when you're past that, separation anxiety shouldn't really be relevant anymore. So if it is, your child's behavior is trying to tell you something. Our little kids talk to us and communicate via their behavior. All right. Okay, bedwetting is also a red flag if it's all of a sudden and there's no biological reasoning for it. As well as, because now the kids start to draw. A 3-year-old shouldn't excessively draw penises unless mommy and daddy walks around naked. And remember, how tall are you when you're 3? So what's your viewpoint, correct? And unless if your penis is anal, because you had an operasie gehad, you had an operation on your penis, die voorvalletjies gesny or something, or if you're potty training and it hurts for some other physical reason, then obviously it's in your foreground, so you will and might draw penises on your drawings, but it's few and far between. But now we get those children who draw sexual organs every day on their human drawings. Ne? That's another question altogether. That's another thing. Let me think if there was anything else. Engaging other children in sexual play. It's not okay. Now I'm not talking about the occasional 5-year-old child who plays doctor. Without intrusion. Think with me of what is intrusive play. If I intrusively play with you, I come into your boundary. And I even touch or lick or pull. Some little kids do that. I'm not saying it's abnormal, but I'm saying it might be inappropriate. Remember those 3 categories: normal behavior, inappropriate, abnormal. So we know for a certain age group and a certain personality child, for certain other reasons, doctor play might be relevant of what I'm talking to now. If it's not abnormal but it's inappropriate, it won't just go away. So we need to intercede. And we need to put boundaries on that. I'm not going to have you play in a room where I can't see you. I'm not going to have you play behind closed doors. Ever. In this day and age, you guys, we cannot have our kids play behind closed doors at all. So, doctor play might really not be an indication of sexual abuse. If you are 12 and you're playing doctor, and you're lining up younger kids for your game, all my red lights are on. What is a 12-year-old supposed to be busy with? Not that. And an 8-year-old is an easy target if I'm 12. They're going to do exactly what I say. That's not okay. That's not okay. If it's 2 6-year-olds who know each other and they like each other and they get along well, you need to put boundaries on that. But I won't phone the psychiatrist or the psychologist just yet. If it persists, and if you get a 5-year-old who constantly wants to get the other child alone, have you seen how some kids do that? You can sort of see they're trying to dodge the adults. They're trying to set up a situation where they can do something that they're not seen, that's not seen or whatever. That's not okay. I've seen that before. So that's one thing, because why do they know they want to hide it if it's not an issue? If it's just for purely getting info, and I'm playing doctor, how would I know when I'm 4 that I should feel guilty and I should hide this? It has to do, again, the other point is, if I do play doctor, what are my goals here? What do I want to do? The kids that I'm worried about is they play doctor because they want to control, they want to hurt, or they want to play out their own trauma. I'm worried about that. The kids who play to want to get info about how the human body works, that's one thing. And can you see how you as a parent can give him that info without him having to be in a circumstance where he plays doctor with another child? There are other ways to give our kids info. Years ago, we thought that if I give you info, the itch will become more. There's no proof of that. If we give children info, and I'm saying itch, but the curiosity, it lessens. When we give info, it lessens. I want to give my child info because I don't want her to be curious with a 13-year-old twerp boy who wants to teach her all about masturbation, all of that. I'm going to somewhere when she's 7 start to tell her about that so that she knows what it's about. And then I raise a street smart girl as well. My mission in life is to raise a girl who doesn't, the first time a boy looks at her. I don't want that for her. She's like, you're going to have to do better than that, my friend. You know? So I want to equip her. And she doesn't have brothers. But if she had, that would be marvelous because then she would see right through boys because she grows up with one, hey?
Yeah.
So that's just from my side. Okay, so that's the abnormal. And when there's overly interest in body parts and in nakedness and in adults being naked. You would see a little one maybe peeping through the toilet hole and
Wanting to see.
It's not okay. It's not okay. And the other thing is the sexual play with other kids. There's a percentage of children who have been exposed, not necessarily sexually abused, but exposed to inappropriate stuff, which also could, I suppose, be seen as abuse. There's a percentage of them who played out with other kids because they want to understand what they've just noticed. They want to understand it, so they do play it out. It doesn't mean we should allow it. All right. And then the second last thing that I wanted to say about that is when a 4-year-old plays with dollies, what looks to you as sex. Rubbing each other, fraying, kissing each other. We must know. So we want to be around if our kids play. We don't want to be on Facebook because we might be missing something. So every day, at least half an hour, 20 minutes, if you can just be around where your child plays to see how he or she plays. So if they try to imitate adult sexual activity, red lights. And the other thing is, let me just think now what I wanted to say. Inappropriate sexual knowledge. And now I'm going to be very explicit if you will permit me to. Inappropriate sexual knowledge. If I'm a girl and I'm 3 years old and I've never had Inappropriate put into me, ever, how do I know something goes into the anus? Think with me here. How should I know something can go into an anus? What do little kids learn? Poofy comes out. Different story. If you're using Inappropriate or fever medication and you're putting that into your little girl's bum. Different story because then we have an explanation. But a 3-year-old that has never had exposure to that shouldn't know something goes in. Alright? So inappropriate sexual knowledge. Sorry, I need to be mindful of the kids who are here. Okay, I'm gonna try to be less specific. Sorry. When we look at penis and all the things that a penis can do, should a 3-year-old know sensory stuff that happens with the penis? Why in the world? 3-year-old can maybe know that pee-pee comes out there, but that's it. And pee-pee doesn't go out when you're in the bed. Pee-pee comes out when you're at the toilet. So that's what I mean by inappropriate detailed knowledge. Should have your radars up on why does my child know this? What you know if you're a little girl 3-4 years old, you know what happens at the toilet from your own body's perspective. You know what can come out. Maybe even with little girls they start to explore because we're curious. So they do know, maybe some of them, that something can come into the vulva. We shouldn't allow them to hurt themselves that way, of course not. But for some little girls, they know something can go in there, but not in the anus. And if they know something can go in there, why not, and I may be challenging some of you based on your own upbringing, but why not give them a mirror why not sit next to them in the bathroom and have them look what they look like? Sort of to lessen the curiosity, and we go on with our lives. And if you see she wants to put something in there, you teach her. It's going to be Aina because it's very soft skin in there. It's going to be Aina, my darling. If you are ever curious again, maybe even tomorrow night, you just call me. I'll bring you the mirror again. You just call me. Right? Obviously, different story if she wants to look at your vulva. It's my private stuff. It's my private. No. But use a mirror if you want to use yours, but don't hurt yourself.
Yeah.
So girls figure this out a bit later than boys for obvious reasons. Boys can sit in the bath and figure out what their bodies can do, which is fine. I'm going to teach you a boundary that it's not okay to do that with other bodies because we respect other people. We respect their stuff, not only their toys, but also their bodies. So that's why we don't do it with other people. And we may use the word private with little kids. We should never really use the word right and wrong. Previous sexual abuse programs advocated for right or wrong. But if there's a wrong component to it, it could mean my body is wrong. My urges are wrong. And by the way, if that little tummy key is turned on, an urge is an urge. If you are 6 years old or if you are 17 years old. Because we all have hormones and God made our bodies the same. So if I'm 6 and I rub, it's going to feel warm and I'm going to get that sexy feeling. Same as when I'm an adult. When the flummicky is unfortunately turned on. Now I have that urge. Now mom needs to teach me. What do I do with that urge? When do I do what with that urge? So then I would teach that little one how to keep herself safe, how to wash her hands afterwards, how to not check out other bodies because we sort of look the same. You're allowed to check you, but not allowed to put things in because it could hurt you. And I know this is a far stretch from how our parents were raised, regarding the sexual. But if we're not going to adapt our ways now, we're going to miss the mark. Because where 20 years ago, the sexual issues and the pornography issues emerged in maybe grade 10 for me, standard 10, standard 8, 9, 10. It's now surpassed the lower mark. We are now talking about grade 4s, grade 3s, grade 4s. The teenagers are struggling with LGBTQ. They're struggling with weird and wonderful other stuff these days. So we need to be relevant because our little ones, they're growing up and they're going to be teenagers in 10 years from now. And then the ball game has already changed, right? So I want my teenagers to have the foundation.
So I wanted to ask,
Yes.
you know, when you say about when the switch comes on,
Yes.
is that connected to an age? Sorry, no. So that switch can come on at whenever, if there's an exposure. And then I want to know, then do the hormones come? Because you're talking about like the hormones. So, well, when I was at school, we learned like our hormones come when we start our period. So that was like 11, 12. I presume now it's starting younger. Like children are physically getting hormones earlier.
Because of xenoestrogens.
Okay.
Amongst other things.
Yes. And then I wanted to know, like, when that light is switched on, is it switched on with hormones, or like do hormones come with the light switching on? Is it clear?
Okay. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Let me answer you.
So it's a very good question. It's almost like the chicken and egg scenario.
Which one?
So how I can explain the biological side of things is not one of your kids here will stand up and start walking exactly at the same spot. There's a biological maturity that goes with it. Rypwording. Ons het in Afrikaans by sielkunde gepraat oor rypwording, a maturity, biological. It has to do with your DNA and your blueprint. Right. That's the one side of it. So the moment your body is there, when the hormones develop, then it's going to be switched on because now you're going to search out and you're going to live your life as a hormone sexual being because the hormones are there now. So you may search for certain experiences or info because we're naturally curious. That's what
our body is.
That's it. That's the outflow of biological maturation. Is naturally that will be switched on because I'm going to do research. I'm going to read up on stuff. I'm going to read that book that mommy bought, but she's too shy to tell me about. She just said I'm going to hide it there in the cupboard at the right hand top. Then I'm going to do it because I need info. We're curious, and my body now developed. That's the one part. The other part of it is when it's not biological, but it's environment. That's when I'm stimulated with stuff that excels my hormone development.
Okay.
And the strongest experience counts. So when I'm abused weekly, I will menstruate quicker. My biological hormones will set in place quicker. And we've got stuff in the environment like the estrogen in the water that we are drinking. The xetoestrogen that's emitted from our cars when our car is in the sun. The TV, the television screen omits xetoestrogen. All of this excels the hormone development. I want to say for the good and the bad, but it's not. It's actually for the bad. But the environmental stuff happens faster these days. So we are now sitting with kids from 7 or 8 years old who menstruate already. Where I think the average in my day was 13 years old.
13, 14.
And I remember what it was like for me. And maybe if you want to think back to yourself, I would have loved to be prepared a bit earlier. So we prepare first. So by then, when the stuff actually happens, we're okay. We know what this is about. You don't skrik, you're prepared. You're fully prepared. So that tells us we need to talk to our girls and boys about menstruation already, also by 7, actually at the latest.
Okay, so one question. I have
Yes.
boys, 3 boys. Do I have to educate my boys about menstruation? Even though they are not girls? So that they are aware what other girls go through.
Right,
Of course, I'm also doing what
Of
the boys
course,
go through.
sure. I would suggest that we now said if there was no other exposure, by 6 or 7 we teach them about boys' bodies and girls' bodies. Then you build that info on there a year or 2 later. Because they're getting to deal with girls, and also maybe your 6-year-old might come to you and ask you about girls then as well. Maybe you taught him everything now about eggs and sperms and about what his body can do and maybe morning glory. And then he would say to you, but what about girls? Then he's ready to hear about it. If he doesn't, you wait a little, and because we are having continuous conversations, you would know. But 13 is too late for boys to know about girls and for girls to know about boys. Because remember, they're sitting together with boys in the school, in the classroom, in the environment there are boys. So I want my girl to know about boys, but not in too much detail if it's not yet relevant. But if it's relevant, I need to teach them. So maybe even if boy walks in while you are changing yourself with a pad or a tampon, that's a good time then to educate him. Maybe he's only 5, but you know he saw, you know he knows you know. And I know of a single mom who's got 5 boys. So ever since they grew up, they knew, because they're with her in the bathroom. She's a single mom. There's no dad, there's no auntie, there's no, gaan gou daar, I just want some meat on her. There's nothing of that. So they knew. But the point is also how you carry that info over. Is that going to be in a normal way or in a very that way? Because that's going to have an effect on how the boys file it. How they file it. I know when I was 12, the only reason really I think that they taught the boys about menstruation was so that the boys don't make fun of our suitcases and don't scratch for things in our suitcases, because there might be a surprise packet in there, you know. I think you could have done it so much more empowering for the boys if you give them more info about how wonderful this is, because that's the same boy who will grow up maybe becoming a dad, standing next to their wife during the birth process, wanting to support their wife through whatever. So they need to be comfortable with it. I would like my boy to be comfortable with this, with menstruation, masturbation, with all of it.
I have to say, I'm very much like that. And my husband, because he grew up with like a living nanny and a dishwasher and a this and a that, and like, so he like, that's how they grew up. Whereas my mom did everything herself. So he was also just like, you need.
So I often heard they start to rub about 4 with a teddy or with a blankie. And it's difficult for us to handle that.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And
Because
be mindful of the words we use.
yes, so how do
cause
you
the
talk?
shame.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You just turn a blind eye.
Absolutely.
What do you do? How do you talk about that?
I
It's
think-
difficult. It's a difficult one.
It is.
And it's a very good question. I think if we use the example of a 4-year-old who figured out she can rub, but we leave it. We just turn a blind eye. What could happen is the friends could start to see. And I had more than one case like this, where the friends started to see and they just didn't want to talk or play with her anymore. So can you see the now social effects as well as the emotional effects of that? If we don't address it, it can go there. But we also need to figure out, if I see my child is rubbing, why? And that's also in the PowerPoint I'm going to send you, girls. Various reasons for sexual behavior. From the outside looking in, a girl rubbing could be seen as sexual behavior. She's arousing and she's feeling that it, daar's sien wie eindpunte daar, so something is feeling. So there could be reasons for that. So I would like to know. Firstly, I would like to know, is she rubbing once in 8 days? Or is she rubbing 8 times a day? And I would like to know what are the effects of her rubbing. I would like to know, is she participating in all the other activities? Is she playing? Is she social? Or is she more concerned about rubbing than actually developing and playing and building puzzle and climbing outside? If she does all of those other things and it's once in 8 days, I won't be too worried, but I will try to divert. Gently. I see what you're doing. Quickly come and look. There's a bird outside in the tree. Just see if we can get the attention off of that. Over time, if that doesn't work, then you need to bring the bigger guns out. So anyway, I was busy saying, why do kids do rubbing? So maybe it's because there's just a physical sensation that I got aware of. There's an actual, and I forgot the name of that. There's an actual gross motor, I don't want to call it a disorder. But that's what with little kids. Oh, you guys, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it was called. But you can see it since baby time for a child moving the whole time. Controlling it. It's not like a seizure or something that's out of control. But they're just moving and I want that movement. And it has to do with vestibular action as well. But it's an actual thing. The other reason why they do it is because there could be a sensory integration problem. There could be an issue with proprioception or vestibular, and if that continues to such an extent that it interferes with normal development, then it might be worth your while to get an occupational therapist who specializes in sensory integration to give an opinion on what's happening here. So the one big reason there could be sensory stuff. The other issue could be that gross motor, I can't remember what they call it, but the gross motor issue with the big muscles. And the other reason could be anxiety. That's when we look at a child who is stressed. There's stress at home or there's stress at school. And life or that child's environment is so tense and so huge for her. The only way she could is by using her body. And now it becomes a habit. Then we need therapy, we need emotional input. It won't help that child at all when we divert and we tell her, no, don't do it. It won't help her at all. So it also depends, and I'm answering you, but I'm also not really answering you. It also depends on what the reason is behind that behavior. So we need to observe our kids. We need to be there so that we know what the behaviors are driven by. All right, any other questions? Would it be okay if we end off here? Then I'll go grab the books that I have in my car.